Yep. How'd you get into the game dogs?
So when I was growing up, my dad wouldn't let me have a dog. Um, we were renting, and I always had a bunch of pets anyway. So he's like, you got enough pets and that kind of thing. And the other pets he had limited control on. I'd like go catch a turtle, like what can he do about it, right? I go catch a squirrel, what can he do about it? But a dog, I had to go out and get the dog with him, right? And so
Right.
because he otherwise I would have just got a dog. Like if I lived in a part of the world where I could just go find some stray or get a puppy from someone on the corner, like I would have came home with a puppy
Right.
at
Right.
a lot younger age. But
Yeah.
I lived in a pretty civilized, controlled society, so you can't just go find a dog anywhere.
No, no.
Um, but anyway, so I grew up dreaming of having just any kind of dog. I got it in my head as a little boy that I wanted a Labrador because I read an article about Labradors finding turtles for this researcher, and it'd bring her back, these box turtles, bring it back to the researcher, and the researcher would like tag them and release them and like track them with radio telemetry. And the dog would be the one who finds the turtle initially for the research project. And I
Right.
loved catching turtles. So I was like, I want a lab. And that was like my dream. And then one day when I was like, I think like 12 or 13, something like that, I decided, you know what? I'm going to find out what my favorite dog is. Like I always had it in my head, I wanted a lab, but I've never researched this before. I was big
Right.
on researching stuff. So I went to the library and I read every book I could find on all the different breeds to try and decide what my favorite breed was. And one of the books that I read, it was a series of books. They're short, or I shouldn't say short, but like medium length books about all different popular breeds: pit bulls, Labradors, German Shepherds, Rottweilers, like everything you could think of that's common. They had a whole list of them, and each book was dedicated to that breed. Well, I decided I was going to read the whole series and decide what my favorite was. And I got to the pit bull, and I had a negative, that stereotypical, they're man eaters, they're
Yeah. The stigma.
vicious,
The stigma.
they're stupid, they kill. So I had that in my head when I got the pit bull book, but I was like, I'll read it anyway. And I started reading it, and the author's like, oh, pit bulls love people and they're safe with kids. And I read like that and I stopped. I'm like, this is a load of crap. And I put the book back.
Right.
Um, and I went through and read the rest of the series of books. And I kind of was narrowed down to a couple hunting breeds or something that I decided were my favorites, but I couldn't narrow it totally down. And the neighbor, I was in the suburbs of Chicago, and the neighbor got a pit bull, or at least what they called a pit bull. Nowadays, you never know what it is. People call everything a pit bull, but it looked like a pit bull anyway. So they got this dog that was a pit bull, and because I didn't have my own dog, I would go around and play with the neighbors' dogs. And this was my very next door neighbor. Like we shared a fence. So because it was the most like readily available dog to me, I started playing with it. Even though I had it in my head, oh, I hate this dog. It's going to be vicious. It's going to be mean. Like I was like, I still gave in to my inner love for animals to play with this dog that I, quote unquote, hated. Well, I fell in love with the dog over time. And it was to the point where the dog would listen to me. Like I had it trained to do all these things in their own backyard. Like I would just go knock on the door. You know how little kids go, can I play with Simi or Susie or whatever? I would knock on their door. Can I go play with your dog? So I go in the back and play with their dog. And pretty soon I had this dog trained to do all kinds of things. And he just loved me. And I could tell, like, I don't know what people are talking about. Like, this dog is, I could get it to do anything I want. Like, he's really cool. So I kind of opened my mind at that moment. I was like, maybe pit bulls aren't so bad. So then I went back and read that book that I only read, the first few paragraphs of. And from that point on, I fell in love with pit bulls, decided that was my favorite breed. Still having never owned any dogs, it was just what I decided at that moment. So then I was set on, I was going to get a pit bull. And by this point, I was getting close to my mid-teens. I was like 14, 15. And I was set. I was going to get a pit bull. But my dad still wouldn't let me have a dog. So then I started trying to think of ways to like, okay, there's a little wooded lot by my house. I'm gonna get a dog. I'm gonna chain it up out there, give it a dog house, and like, just go play with it and then put it back so my dad doesn't know I have it. But when I went to the pound, they wouldn't let me adopt a dog. And I was like, crap. And I didn't, I had to be able to ride my bike to the location. So it wasn't like I could get in the newspapers and buy some dog off the newspapers, because I had to be able to ride my bike there. Right.
Right. Exactly.
So I was stumped. I was stumped. And I watched that DMX video. Hey, yo, I'm tripping. I'm falling. I can't get up.
Yeah.
So that music video where he's a little kid and he goes and he steals that black pit bull out of the person's backyard, and he hides it up on the project roof and feeding it bologna and hot dogs. Anyway, I watched that video and I was like, oh, that's how I'm going to do it. And I almost did it, but I couldn't bring myself to steal.
That's a good story, man.
I even had a dog lined up. There was a dog that I passed by on my way to school every day, and I would feed it like little treats and pet it and play with it, because it had a chain but no fence. So I could just go walk in their backyard and play with their dog, kind of make sure no one's peeking at me through the window and play with their dog. So I was like in my head, okay, I'm going to steal this dog, but I just couldn't do it. I knew in my heart that was wrong. And so I never did it. I never went through with it. So I ended up never getting that dog that I wanted until I moved out of the house, which I moved out really early age. I moved out when I was 15, excuse me. And I lived with my grandpa, because my grandpa was a horse trainer. Mm-hmm. And me and my dad, as you could kind of guess from the way I've told the story so far, we didn't get along very well. Like, my dad's really stubborn. I'm really stubborn. But my dad is not an animal person at all. Well, my whole family, my parents, my brothers, none of my siblings, nobody's really into animals but me. And I'm like up to my neck obsessed.
Yeah, you're animals. All in.
Like, I was catching squirrels at age 10 and bottle raising them, and like training. I was training crows when I was like 7 or 8. No, 8 or 9. I had a pet crow that would just fly around the neighborhood. Like, I was obsessed from day one. I had turtles that I could whistle. And how did you
catch the crow though? How did you catch the crow?
I don't know if it was injured or young. I think it was young, because it had a pink mouth. So crows have a black mouth, but when they mature, it turns pink. And it was old enough that it looked like an adult, but it had a pink mouth and it couldn't fly. And I was just a little kid. I'm like 8 years old, so I don't really know why it couldn't fly. But my assumption now as an adult, with the knowledge I have, is it was probably just a baby that it was old enough it looked like an adult, but young enough it couldn't fly.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was obsessed with all kinds of animals, not just dogs, my whole growing up. So, and my dad being not an animal guy at all, we bumped heads all growing up. Finally, when I was 15, I got into some trouble in Chicago, the gang kind of activity stuff. I wasn't like into it, but I had friends that were, and it was worrying my parents really bad. And anyway, long story short, they sent me to live with my grandparents.
And you had to get up out of there. Basically.
Well, it was good. I think I would have gotten some pretty big trouble. Like, I wasn't doing anything bad yet. I mean, you saw, I didn't even steal a dog. Like, I still had a good heart, but the people I was associated with, everyone that I got along with, they were in it pretty, well, a lot deeper than I was, let's say. So anyway, they were worried I was going to end up gangbanging, and so they sent me to live in the country, and it saved me. I mean, I probably would have got in some trouble at some point.
No, that's a good decision, man. It is.
And it was just in time, because I hadn't really done anything yet. Like, I'd done some minor stuff. I guess I could have technically got in trouble for, but nothing like serious yet. But I was right on the edge, and they knew it. So they're like, okay, we're not going to wait. And they pushed me off. And so when I was with my grandpa, he was against pit bulls. They were like, he actually had a legitimate reason for it, though, to be fair, because he had livestock and horses, right? And bulldogs, to be frank, are animal aggressive, right? And you do run the risk of them hurting his cattle dogs, or hurting a horse, or hurting a cow. So I mean, he had a legitimate concern, but I was convinced, I could train them. I'll keep them out of trouble. You know, if they're that aggressive, I'll just keep it on a chain. Like, I was a responsible kid. I wasn't your typical kid. I was more responsible than most adults when it came to animals. So I was like, I won't be a problem, Grandpa, but he wouldn't let me have one. But one day, so I ended up getting a collie. Was my first dog, was one of his, a pup from one of his litters of
Oh,
his
we got
cow
something
dogs.
in common. We got something in common.
Oh yeah,
I had a collie. I had a collie.
yeah. That was my
That
first
was one of
dog.
my
His name was
first dogs
Sean.
that I really can remember that I having for multiple years. It was a collie.
Awesome. Did you work him at all, or was he just a pet, or what do you do?
No, I was a kid. I was young. My
Oh,
dad
okay.
brought him home, and something like that.
Oh,
One of
that's
those
awesome.
things that I think I didn't ask him, but I think he drove him away somewhere when it
Oh
was
no.
trying to get rid of him. It's like, where did Chief go? I don't
That's
know.
too bad.
Maybe I should ask him.
So
Yeah, I
yeah,
was
my
young.
my first my first dog was a collie, and I trained to be a cow dog because that's what we did. We're on the ranch, so I trained him to work cattle, and he was a good dog for it being a first timer's dog. He was a really good dog. I definitely did some dumb stuff, and he could have been better, like no doubt. But being a first timer's dog, like I'd never owned any dog before this, he was actually really good, um, despite my mistakes. Um, but then we moved. At this point, we are out in the middle of nowhere in Idaho. Like, so in the middle of nowhere, you could take a high power rifle and shoot it any direction, and that bullet's just going to skip across the sand. Like, there's nothing for it to hit. No
Right, right.
trees, no rocks, no houses, no car. It's just going to skip till it loses momentum. So anyway, we moved from there to Utah, and that was a little more like closer to city, closer to people, and a stray dog ended up on the place that looked like a pit bull. And I mean, obviously, who knows what it actually was, but she looked like a pit bull, and didn't have dog aggression at all. So probably wasn't, but who knows? So I immediately like latched onto her, and my grandpa, is like, what can he say? Like the dog showed up, I didn't go out and get it. So
Right.
he was reluctantly, very reluctantly, let me keep her, and that was my first kind of bulldog. Like I said, who knows what it really was. And
Right, right.
I trained her to hunt with my collie, because my collie, I tried to get him to hunt, but he wouldn't really use his nose, and he was really soft. Like anything that kind of stood up to him, he'd just stand back and bark at it. So but he was quick and athletic, and he could see really well. This pit bull looking dog, she had poor eyesight but a good nose and wasn't that fast. So they would work together as a perfect team. She would track it down. Once it became in sight, the collie would run it down and like nip it on the butt and make it slow down. And then the bulldog would come up behind and just plow it over. So
Yeah, yeah.
between the two dogs, they were like the perfect team. And I had her for a while, and then we ended up moving, and my grandpa wouldn't let me bring her, so I gave her to a family, and then sorry, this was supposed to be a quick answer to a short question.
Oh, no, no. We're
Um,
just cooking. We're just cooking.
so then after that, I went on a mission. Do you know the Mormon or LDS faith? Are you familiar with that at all?
Yeah, yeah. Out in Utah out there.
Yeah. So have you seen those guys with the little black badges and the white shirts and ties that ride around on
I have.
bikes and
I
knock
have.
on doors? Okay. So I did that for 2 years. So moving me out to my grandparents really changed my life, as you can imagine. So I got, as we say in the church, on the straight and narrow, and
Right.
I changed my life. I changed my outlook, and I became involved in church again. Like I was always grown up in the church, but I
That's
had
right.
that wayward stage in my life where I obviously was stepping back quite a bit. Well, then on my own, my grandparents didn't actually really go to church much. They kind of went sometimes. So I kind of on my own went back to church and became faithful and active again.
Right.
And then when I turned 19, I decided to go on a mission. So for 2 years, I served a mission in Iowa and Nebraska. And here's the funny part. So while I was gone, my parents got a puppy
Uh-oh.
for the first time. Like, so, right. So my whole life, I never had a puppy, and they absolutely, if they were going to get a puppy, it wasn't going to be a pit bull. Right. So they get this puppy, and they send me a picture of it. And I'm on my mission, so like I'm nowhere near them. I'm out of state. And I look at this picture, I'm like, wait a minute. What
Right.
kind of dog is that? And they're like, my dad made up some stupid name of some breed that doesn't exist. He was like American Terrier or something. Like it's not even a
Yeah.
breed, right? But he didn't want to say what it was. He's like, it's an American Terrier or something funny. And I'm like, American Terrier. Okay, Dad. That looks like a pit bull to me. So,
Yes.
so when I get off my mission, I end up coming back home to my parents rather than to my grandparents. And this
Right.
dog is like, I think like 6 months old at this point, and very obviously a pit bull looking dog. I asked them where they got it, and they just got it from a neighbor. So, like, who knows what it really was? But
Right.
this
Right. Right.
thing acted like a bulldog. Like, it
Right.
was on fire. It could see a dog way down the street, and it would be on its back legs, like, just going nuts, wanting to
Yeah.
fight that other dog. And my mom's like, I don't know what to do with this dog. I can't even take it on a walk. If there's a dog anywhere near it, just goes crazy. She's really nice with people, but man, she's just crazy, wants to fight. And I'm like, let me see what I could do with her. So I take her and I train her to hunt. And I'm like, get the raccoon, get the raccoon, get the raccoon, leave the dog alone. Get the raccoon, get the raccoon, get the raccoon, leave the dog alone. And pretty soon she's like, oh, okay, no more dogs. And she
Right.
flipped. Like she was crazy. She would kill puppies like anything. I remember when I first saw her, they came out to my mission to visit, and we went to part of my mission was on an Indian reservation. And I
Hmm.
don't know if you've ever been to an Indian reservation, but the dogs just run wild there. They're like half feral, running around everywhere. Um, so that you can imagine having a dog that hot on an Indian reservation is just begging for an accident. She's just
Right.
just
Right.
wanting to get everything. Well, we
Yeah.
saw this one family had some puppies that was born under their porch, and I'm playing with the puppy, and she snatched the puppy out of my hands. I had to like save the thing. Like, so it didn't matter if it was big, small, young, old. She wanted to eat it. So anyway, and like I said, she looked like a bulldog. She was like 38 pounds, athletic build, bully head. She looked like a bulldog. And anyway, so whatever she was, that's what she was like. And I trained her, you know, stop focusing on dogs, focus on hunting, focus on hunting. And she switched and wouldn't bother dogs after that. Totally solid. You could literally have another dog pick a fight with her, and she would shut her mouth because she knew she couldn't fight, and she would wrestle with it, mouth shut, no
Right.
teeth.
Right. Right. Right.
And you'd be like, oh, get that other dumb dog away. And she's like, nope, I was listening. See, my mouth was shut.
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Exactly.
and then she could get on a coon and just go to town. But she knew, oh, dogs are off limits. Okay, I won't get the dog. So that was my second like experience. But again, we don't know how she was bred. Like, who
Right.
knows
Right.
what she was. So
Right.
then I got into the mink pretty soon after that. And I hunted. I didn't have any dogs for a few years. I would still go home and visit. I ended up coming back out west to Utah, but I would go back to visit. And every time I went to visit my family, I'd go take their dog hunting, the little family,
So fast
pit
forward.
bull
This
things.
is so you was 19. So this is what about
I would have
what 20,
been
21?
21,
Okay. Okay.
21 at that point.
Okay.
And I lived at home for a year, was it? 2 years, maybe. I can't remember. A year or two, I stayed at home. So at about 22, 23, I moved back to Utah.
Okay.
And by that point, like the dog was solid. She wouldn't fight anything, but she loved to hunt. So I would go back and visit for like Christmas or during the summer or something. And I go take that dog hunting. And then I go back home and she wouldn't see me for another year. But when I got into the mink, I just focused on the mink. I didn't have any dogs for a while. But my friend who was in it with me, he got a dog, and I saw how useful it was to have both the mink and the dogs working together. And I
Right.
was like, dude, I need to get a dog. But my focus was I'm going to get whatever I think fits best for hunting. So I didn't go back to, even though I, still had a fondness for pit bulls, I just thought, you know what, I'm going to get whatever works best. And of course, all these other dogs are bred for hunting. So I'm going to get one bred for hunting, not one, you know, bred for bulldog activities. So I went and I worked with different breeds and mixed breeds through the years. And over time, I found that there was a specific job that I felt like, as my business grew, it went from a hobby to a business. I'm doing pest control as an actual income at that point, with dogs and mink working together to get rats or raccoons. Obviously, the mink didn't do anything with the raccoons. That was just dogs. The dogs would be getting pest raccoons and things like that. Well, over those years, I'd been through many different breeds and mixed breeds of dogs. And I run into a situation where I realized it would be very beneficial for me to have a smaller dog that could go down pipes and under porches and in attics and stuff to get raccoons, but it needed to be enough dog to dispatch the raccoon on its own.
Right.
And a lot of people think, like Patterdale Terriers or Yog Terriers, oh yeah, man, they kill raccoons all the time. It's like, have you ever really hunted with one? Like, that's not really the case. A Patterdale Terrier or a Yog Terrier or any other terrier one-on-one with a coon is not a pretty picture. If you have a gritty enough dog to stick with it, he's going to be just beat up in the end of it.
Right.
Even if he does end the coon, if is still the big question. Even if he does end the coon, your dog's going to be laid up for a while. And I was running into these pest control situations where I couldn't help the dog. See, the traditional way of hunting with a terrier is not for the terrier to end it. The terrier needs to engage the animal in a burrow. You dig down to it and you dispatch the animal. The terrier just keeps it there and fights with it, right? It doesn't kill it. But I was running into these pest control situations where I needed the dog to end it. I couldn't. Like under a shed, what am I going to lift their shed up with a forklift and help the dog? You know what I mean? Or a pipe. I'm going to dig up the road down to where the pipe is and break the pipe open and help the dog. Like, they weren't situations where the dog could reasonably be helped. And so I was thinking, man, I've got a 60-pound dog that can handle a coon, and he'll crawl into the holes that he can fit in, which are limited, being 60 pounds. And he can end a coon. And I've got these little dogs, these little terriers that could get into the tight places and fight a coon, but man, they're just not realistically going to end it. And like I said, if they end it, it's not very pretty.
Right.
So I got thinking, man, if I got me a rough little like 35 pound, 32 pound, 28 pound pit bull, like the small end of the breed, I could probably have a dog that's enough dog to finish the coon, but he's small enough to fit in at least some of those spots, right? He's not going to be able to fit in the same tight places as a Patterdale, but he's going to fit in a lot tighter spaces than my 65-pound bull lurcher, right?
Right.
And so that's what got me thinking, man, that would be really cool. Let's see if that idea works. And I had some friends that already crossed pit bulls and Patterdales, and they run pit Patterdale crosses. And my thoughts were along the lines of, well, if you need the pit to get the job done, why even mess with the Patterdale? Why not just get a pure pit that's small enough for the job? And I'm like, maybe there's a reason for that, but why not try it? And, my whole life I'd wanted a real pit bull, but I'd never had one. I had these two unknown dogs that kind of looked, they looked just like a pit bull, but who knows what they were. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to find a true, real deal pit bull, just the right size for the job. And I'm going to see if it works. And so then I went on this. With me, I'm kind of obsessed, if you can't already tell, with like,
right.
I want to do things the best possible way. Like I don't go halfway. So I researched and made connections, and little by little, worked into the dogman world enough that I could get what I felt was a legit true blue pit bull, not just some pet, or show dog or weight pull dog or whatever.
Right.
But it had to be the right size and all this other stuff. So anyway, found one, and then, yeah, that's kind of what got me into pit bulls again, I guess, really, for the second time, because I was in it as a kid. I shouldn't say I wasn't in it as a kid, because that's not true. I was mentally in it, right? I was in love with the idea. Um, so now I'm able to actually do it and give them a legitimate job that other breeds really struggle or totally fail at performing. And
So
then what's cool,
you're saying that the pit bull is better for the job when it comes to those coons and different size animals.
in the right situation, yes. So
Okay.
obviously, if the hole's too small, then it's still going to be a Patterdale, but they're not going to be able to end it on their own under vast majority of circumstances. You're still going to need to get in there and help the dog.
Right,
Well,
exactly.
what's interesting, and this was a shocker to me, what I didn't really expect is for my pit bull to be very good at ratting. Like, I didn't think he would be bad at it. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. I just didn't think she would be anything special. I thought she'd
Right.
just be like any other run of the mill dog. But right now, without a doubt, without any comparison, the best ratting dog I own is that first bulldog I got, Bindi.
Okay.
And it's a combination of her athletic ability and her brain. She's smart enough to figure it out, because ratting, it looks mindless to someone who's never done it before. All the rats just run and the dogs catch them. But no, actually, there's a lot of calculation that comes down to it, to the dog's point of view, of knowing where to stand, guessing where the rat's going to come out and how the rat's going to come out and where that rat's going to run to when it does come out. All of those things. The smarter the dog, you could be let's say a 5 in speed, but if you're a 10 in intelligence, you're probably going to catch more rats than a dog who's, 8 or 9 or 10 in speed, just because you're guessing where the rat's going to be due to previous experience, and you're there already. You don't have to run. You're ready to catch it.
You know how they move. You know what type of
Yeah.
stuff those rats pull.
Yeah. And dogs like terriers and sight hounds, they're just not very smart. And so they'll do the same dumb thing over and over and over again and not really learn from their mistakes. They just keep trying the same dumb thing over and over again. And my best ratting dog before her was a quarter pit bull. He was 3/8 whippet, 3/8 greyhound, actually staghound, if you know what that is. And then the other quarter was pit bull. And I always wondered, well, where did he get his brains from? Because most sight hounds aren't very smart. And for some reason, I was like, well, he's only a quarter bull, so who knows how much that influenced it. But after watching my pure bulldog Bindi do the job, I'm like, I'm convinced he got his brains from the pit bull, because
who's this right here? Who are these guys?
Okay, so the little dog I'm holding is a Patterdale named Gypsy. The black dog is a Patterdale Whippet named Leia, and then the buckskin colored dog is Bindi. She's on the top, Grand Champion Gardner's Spike, and the bottom line bred, of course, not out of him. Of course, he's old dog from way back, but the line on the top side is Garner Spike, and then on the bottom is loosely line bred Red Rock.
Okay.
But yeah, she's purebred bulldog, and she's younger in that picture. She's probably a little over a year old, I'm guessing, and now she's 2.5.
Okay, good looking dogs. Real good looking dogs. So the Patterdales, yeah, the APBTs. Okay, so what are some of the things that you're looking for the pit bull to do when they're on those hunts, or not to do?
So not to do, engage other dogs. I don't want them any kind of, even just jealousy stuff. So you would think, a pit bull would have the worst problem out of all of them, but I've actually had a harder time with terriers than with the bulldogs so far. And I'm up to 6 different individuals that I worked with. So it's not like my one dog and the one experience I've had. I've worked with the Hammonds Heinzel cross, obviously the one I've described. One was what was she bred like? I'd have to pull it up. Anyway, so I've worked with several different bloodlines and several different individuals to get to the ones that I've got right now. And they all seem to surprisingly be the easiest to train when it comes to, hey, leave that alone. They have the drive like a terrier. Like terriers are like pit bulls. They just want to get stuff, want to get stuff, want to get stuff. But the difference is in the dogs that I've had, at least, which I mean, 6 dogs isn't that many, right? So you've got the law of large numbers to deal with. But with the dogs that I've worked with, they have such a desire to please that you could teach them pretty easily. Hey, I don't like you doing that. Stop doing that. And they're like, okay, I won't do that. Whereas a terrier, you like have to tell them over and over and over. And pretty soon telling isn't enough. If you catch my drift, you got to make them stop doing whatever it is they're doing. Because terriers just don't care. They have a selfish mindset. And the same, or similar, I should say, high drive as a pit bull. But the pit bulls I've worked with, at least, they have enough desire to please that they're like, oh, you don't want me to do that anymore? Okay. But you also have to remember, like, I'm giving my dogs a large amount of outlet. It's not like a pet that you're sitting at home and you're like, hey, don't bother the cat. Hey, don't bother the cat. And you don't let them do anything. In my experience, any high drive dog, whether it's a Malinois, a terrier, a pit bull, whatever the breed is, that key to them wanting to do what you want is they need to have an outlet. You need to have twice as many yeses as they have no's. Right. So if you're always telling the dog, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. Pretty soon they're just going to be like, dude, screw you. I'm going to do it anyway. I've got to get my teeth into something. Right? Those high drive dogs, that's just how they are. You just tell them, no, 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 no. Eventually they're just going to be like, screw freaking you. I'm going to do it anyway. But with me, I say, no, don't get the mink. Here's a rat. Here's a rat. Here's a rat. Here's a raccoon. Here's a rat. Here's a squirrel. Here's a raccoon. No, don't get the sheep. Here's another rat. You know, here's so they have a huge list of things that they're allowed to do, and they get to do them on a regular basis. So when when you tell them, no, you're not allowed to kill the mink. No, you're not allowed to fight with the other dog. They're a lot more willing to listen because they know there's a lot of other things they're allowed to do and encouraged to do and praised for doing. So they're not, they don't feel bottled up. Like if you were to take a pit bull and put it in a house, you know, a real bulldog, put it in a house and make it live with a Chihuahua and say, hey, you can't kill anything. I mean, chances are he's going to get frustrated one day and you're not going to have a Chihuahua, right? Or a Labrador or whatever your other dog is. But I feel like if you take a bulldog and you say, hey, kill that coon, kill that coon, kill that rat, kill that rat, kill that rat, kill that coon. Yes, good dog, good dog, good dog. Hey, no, you do not fight with this other dog. They're a lot more willing to listen because they've got a lot of outlets. And then the other thing with any kind of high drive dog is you don't just trust them. You don't just be like, oh, my dog's never had a problem. I'm just going to leave it in the backyard unsupervised for 12 hours a day and just trust that he's not going to do it because he's never done it before. That's just foolish. Any high drive animal, you leave them unsupervised long enough, something's going to eventually go wrong. And so you've got to be wise with it and not just like blindly trust any animal with high drive. It doesn't have to be a pit bull. Like I said, any animal with high drive, you always kind of got to keep a leery eye on him and just assume, hey, he's never done a wrong thing in his life, but today might be that day. So I'm going to be aware and alert and observant and ready. I mean, I keep a stick on my side at all times. Unless I'm sleeping or at church, I've got a stick on my side just in case. Though I've never had to use it on any of my dogs. I tell them, hey, you quit that and that's enough. But one day it might not be enough. So I need to be prepared and be wise.
Let's talk about. I think we alluded to like when the APBT is going after the coons. The places that they want to go. Some of the traits that you look for and the places that you would want your APBTs to go, and the reason why they would go to those areas versus some other areas.
So the bigger the dog, the easier it's going to be to dispatch a raccoon. That's just physics, right? You have a 65-pound dog killing a 15-pound raccoon. It's going to be easier.
Right.
So obviously you get to a point where the dog's too big, but just to keep things simple, 60, 70, 80-pound dog is going to have an easier time handling a 15-pound coon than a 40, 30, 20-pound dog.
Right.
That's just obvious. But the problem comes in where the raccoons aren't always going to be in a spot where that big dog can get to them. Raccoons love to hide in under porches, in attics, down in pipes, in burrows, animal burrows, like a beaver burrow, for example. So they'll get into tight places where the luxury of using, or even brush, it doesn't even have to be a hole, just a big 65, 70-pound dog following a raccoon through the little tunnels that they make in thick reeds and thick brush. It's just more difficult for a dog that size to maneuver through these tunnels made by a 15-pound animal, right? Those tunnels are made for a 15 to 20-pound animal, not a 60, 70, 80-pound animal. So when you get a little bulldog that's in that 30-pound-ish range, they're a lot closer to the size of the raccoon, which means they can fit into a lot of the same places.
Okay.
Now, obviously, the smaller the dog, the more places it can follow that raccoon. You get down to a 15-pound dog, he's probably going to follow that raccoon in most places he's ever going to go, assuming that 15-pound dog is built right, built and slim and flexible and able to squeeze into places like a good Patterdale would be built. He has that right conformation, not big shoulders or anything, nice little slender build. Then that 15-pound dog can follow that raccoon almost anywhere because they're the same size. But the problem is that 15-pound dog is going to have a heck of a time dispatching that raccoon, because people don't really realize raccoons are like badgers with hands. Like, they are tough little animals and extremely vicious. They would rather fight than run sometimes. There's many times I've seen a raccoon, he has every chance in the world to escape. He's like, dude, I ain't even going to try and escape. I could beat this dog. Like, they're tough. They're tough. I've even seen them come out of the woods. They're not even being messed with and jump on a dog just because the dog's on a different raccoon. And I want to join that fight. And they'll come out of the woods and jump on your dog. Now, that's rare, but it happens. And it'll be people too, not just dogs. So they're tough, aggressive suckers. So the bigger the dog, the more ability it has to overpower and dispatch that raccoon in a timely fashion. But the smaller the dog, the more places it can fit. So, I mean, really, with a bulldog, you've got the smaller end of the breed is right in that kind of sweet spot where they're big enough to really put the hurt on a coon and end it in a reasonable amount of time. But they're also big enough that that they have the upper hand. I would prefer, honestly, if I could get just an exceptional individual, work with smaller dogs. But frankly, you're running out of options at that point, because just finding a bulldog under 30 pounds is hard enough. Then to find one that's that small and good, it just gets harder and harder.
That's right.
Plus, I love raising them from puppies. I feel like there's a huge advantage raising any dog. It doesn't have to be a bulldog. Any dog from a puppy, you have a huge advantage over, because you've given that dog every experience it's ever experienced, and you can build up its confidence and give it lots of growing experiences and learning experiences all growing up, and build a relationship with that dog that's much deeper than if you'd have got it later in life. So I prefer to get a puppy. And that's the other downside is, man, you could get a puppy from a 32-pound sire and a 29-pound dam and still end up with a 45-pound dog. So you just never know with bulldogs. Their size is not consistent at all.
And explain the importance of why you would want the APBT or whatever animal you're using to dispatch the animal quickly.
Well, for one, it saves the dog injuries. Right. The longer it takes, the more banged up the dog's going to get. But I mean, just to be fair to the raccoon, you want that poor creature put down as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
That's right.
It's it's not just for your own personal interests. Oh, I want my dog to be in good shape. Yeah, you also don't want the poor raccoon to suffer. I mean, it's not the raccoon's fault he's causing problems. That's just his nature. So there's no reason to
Yeah,
cause him unnecessary pain and suffering. Let's just get it
that's
done
right.
as quick and as humane as possible. And then
Yeah,
the logical reason behind it, that's like the emotional reason, right? There's no real logic behind that. It's just motion. I feel bad for the animal.
right,
But
right.
the logical reason is if you don't, your dog's not going to be good for a few days. He's got to have to rest for days or weeks to
Right.
overcome, what happened in the
Yeah,
process
exactly.
of dispatching that raccoon.
Yes, yes. Let's get on these minks. Let's get on these minks. Let's talk about these minks and just tell us about them. Tell us about them.
So mink, what got me into mink to begin with was I was told that mink were impossible to tame, impossible to train, the most vicious, horrible creatures alive. And as a teenage boy that had experience training birds of prey for falconry, training cattle horses and cow dogs with my grandpa, and then just as a little kid raising squirrels and any other wild animal I could get my hands on, pet raccoons, all kinds of stuff, I felt like, part of it was my stubborn nature, part of it was being a teenager, and part of it was, frankly, my previous experiences. I felt like I could do it, right? People said it was impossible. It made me want to try. You can't
Right.
do it. It's impossible. Well, that makes me want to try even more. So,
Right.
um, mink are bred for their fur, and so they've got farms of them where they're just row after row of cages full of these little animals, and they breed them for their fur. And we moved next to a mink farm. That's what got me asking, what is a mink? And that's what led to the answer. They're the most vicious, horrible thing alive. You don't want to touch them. And I'd
Right.
ask, well, what if you raised one from a bottle? Would it be nice then? No, they're mean as babies. They'll literally kill each other in the nest before they're old enough to walk. They're killing their own siblings and eating them. Like they're just vicious animals. And I'm like, huh. And I kept thinking, well, what if you did this? What if you do that? And always the answer was no, it's impossible. I've tried it. I talked to people who were farmers for generations. It wasn't like they were new to it. They were born into mink farming, and they're swearing up and down, dude, it's impossible. I've tried it as a kid. I tried it as an adult. You can't tame them. So this fueled my desire to try it. And I found a mink that had escaped from a farm and was running around. I caught it. I tamed it. It frankly wasn't that big of a deal. And I'm like, you guys are silly. Like, I got this one tame. It's my first try. And they're like, one of the guys saw the mink. It was a gray colored mink. He's like, well, if you were going to have success, that's the color you would have success with. The gray ones are easier. I'm like, okay, well, what's the hard colored ones? And they're like, black ones. So then I, of course, eventually found a black one, tamed it. And long story short, being that I was a falconer, I trained birds of prey for hunting. I naturally had the kind of tendency to think of what could I do with this animal hunting wise, and knowing it was such an aggressive little creature, because I mean they're right, they are stubborn, aggressive little suckers. You just have to know how to handle them right to make them manageable. But I thought, with that feisty nature, I wonder what I could hunt with one. So I started messing with, I did some research. I found out they were semi-aquatic, that they dived underwater and caught fish. And so the first thing I thought of was, man, that would be cool to go fishing with one. So I started experimenting with the idea of fishing with one. And while out fishing one day, I went to a little city park where they had, little to my knowledge, they had a rat infestation because people were feeding the ducks lots of bread, and then the rats would eat the bread and then burrow into the banks of the stream. And so they had a big old rat infestation, but I didn't know that. I was there to try and catch fish. But my mink kept going down these holes and chasing out the rats. And I was like, you know what? I'm trying to get my mink to focus on the fish, and all it wants to do is catch rats. And this rat catching is actually kind of fun. So I kind of switched from my original goal, which was to learn how to fish with a trained mink. It switched to, man, this is kind of fun chasing rodents with them. So I started hunting rats and squirrels and muskrats. Well, that then led to people asking me for help. Hey, I've got a rat in my wall. I've got a rat under my shed. I've got a rat, doing this or that. Can you help me catch it? And of course, I do it for fun, so I'm more than willing to come help. Well, pretty soon, people start paying me for it. So then I start charging. And little by little, it goes from a hobby into a business. And then eventually, like I said, I started seeing the advantage of using dogs alongside the mink. So I then acquired dogs for the purpose of working with my mink, a dog to begin with, and then eventually started getting multiples. I just realized, when rats are coming out 5 or 6 at a time, one dog, it doesn't cut it. So yeah, and it just kind of went from there, became a full-on business. And as far as how the videos started, I didn't when I started in YouTube was just like Facebook, in that it was just like something you would share with others. It wasn't like, now people think of it as like a business, like, oh, you could become rich being a YouTuber. Back when I started it, there was no way to make money on YouTube. It was just, hey, let me share what I'm doing. Just like Facebook. Here's my picture of me doing this.
It was the real passion for it,
Yeah. So the reason I was sharing those videos was, as far as I knew, I was the only guy doing it. As far as I know, no one had ever trained a mink for hunting or fishing or anything useful. I did eventually find people who had tamed them and kept them as pets. So it wasn't like I was the first guy to have one as a pet. But as far as I knew, I was the first one to do something useful with them. So I wanted to document what I was doing. And so I was posting these videos basically like hey, this is how I've learned to train this mink. And this is how this is the success I'm having with that mink. And it was basically just kind of a sharing what I've learned kind of deal. And then eventually someone stopped me and was like, hey, dude, you've got 100,000 views on this video. You could be making some money. And I'm like, making money? How do you make money from a video? And he's like, well, let me show you. And he showed me how this was like 2012. He showed me how to, because I started in 2008 with the videos. 2012, he showed me how to monetize, if I remember right. It was 2012. Showed me how to monetize. And then little by little, I started making money with it. And then I started doing pest control. So I was making pest control money on one side, YouTube money on the other. And then eventually it just got to the point where I was like, yeah, there's no point in me having another job. I need to just focus on this. So.
Right. Now that was huge. Power play. So
it was luck. I don't know if luck's the right word, but it was nothing I did. Like, I didn't have any goal or plan to become a pest control guy or to make any money on YouTube. It just kind of happened. And as it happened, I kind of took advantage of it more and more and started making effort to make it happen more,
It sounds like it was genuine, just that's what you love to do. And you just did it and it just paid off. You weren't really thinking about it. That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
It's fortunate.
Good deal. Let's talk about safekeeping, housing and handling these animals.
The mink specifically, you mean?
Let's say somebody was looking to get one. What would they need?
So first thing I would say is read my book. I wrote a 252-page book on the subject of training, housing, feeding, all that. So that would be my first recommendation, is just read the book. But to give you guys the clip,
I'm gonna drop that in the description too, so you guys can go check it out.
But to give you guys the cliff notes, mink farms, they say all a mink needs is water to drink. But in my opinion, they're a lot better off if they have water to swim in, especially when it's hot out. So I like an enclosure to have lots of room for one. So even though they're a small creature, even just the size of a dog kennel is not very roomy for them. I have great big kennels, if you want to call them. They're 32 foot by 5 foot wide by 10 feet at the tallest point, 6 feet at the shortest point, I think. So they're great big enclosures. They've got a swimming pool to swim in. They've got branches to climb on, tunnels to run through. You don't have to go that crazy, but that's in my book. I actually show like a poor man's version of that, where you basically attach smaller cages with a pipe so they can run back and forth between the cages. There are inexpensive ways to basically get to the same result where the mink has more room. And I show that in my book, and some of my videos as well.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
really the end story is the more area they have to move in, the better. And the more exercise you can give them, the better, because they're like a bolio dog, man. They're just like, they just want to go all the time. And then they'll crash and sleep. And then they wake up and they're just like frantic, wanting to do stuff
all over again. Yeah.
So the more you can exercise them or give them a big enrichment in their enclosures, the better.
Oh man. So handling them. How would you go about that? Are they going to run away too? Like, how do you do they know you? Like, what's going on? Do I have to keep them locked up all the time, or can I let them hang out and chill, or what?
Yeah, chill isn't really in the mink's vocabulary. They are just wired. They're bolio dogs. They want to run, they want to dig, they want to climb. They're just all over the place. And like I said, when they crash, they're gone, and they'll go to sleep for a minute, and then they get up and go again. So the problem is with mink, they're not a social creature like a dog. So they don't want to hang out with you unless you give them a reason to. So I create a bond and a relationship with mine, and they understand. Even the ones I can't handle, they'll bite me if I touch them. They understand I'm there as their hunting buddy. But the only reason they understand that is because we've done it so much that they're smart enough to realize, hey, I have no instinct to be his buddy, but my brain tells me I need to stick around him because he helps me find muskrats and he feeds me when I don't catch anything. So I need to stay around him to some degree. But they still have that independent streak. So if you kind of turn your back for a moment too long, they might forget that and go off on their own and end up a half mile downstream. You have no idea where they're at. So you got to keep a very close eye on them when you're out, and you teach them to come back using food reward. So because they're not a social animal like a dog, you can't just call them over and pat them on the head. Heck, they probably don't want you to touch them to begin with. So patting them on the head is not a benefit to them. They just want to get out and catch something. They want to catch a rat, catch a fish, crayfish, something. And so, and if they realize you're there to help them with that, they'll stick around you closer. But that's just because you're there and they know you're going to help them catch something easier. So, so I teach them to come back for food. Because I'm using a food reward, I have to keep them at a specific weight so that they are hungry. So unlike dogs and people, I guess people would be a better example. You know, a guy could be 100 pounds overweight, but if he hasn't eaten for 24 hours, he thinks he's starving to death, right? Or a guy could be like slim, trim, like 2 pounds of body fat. He hasn't eaten for 24 hours. He also thinks he's starving to death, right? Our hunger isn't correlated with the amount of body fat we're carrying. Mink and birds of prey and a few other animals, their bodies specifically tell them, hey, you're running low on fat reserves. You need to eat now. So it's not necessarily how long it's been without food. They might have only eaten 6 hours ago. But if their body fat's low, their body's saying, dude, get up, go catch something. You need to eat now.
Right.
But if their body's got a lot of excess fat, they could go a couple days without eating and their body's still like, nah, if it's convenient, go get something to eat.
Right.
But you don't need to try very hard because we're good for a while. You got a lot of fat on you. So because of that, same with birds of prey, you need to keep them at this optimal level. If they're too low, number one, it's not healthy. They're not going to be as strong. They're not as healthy. But also they'll be a little too frantic. They'll just be obsessed with food. Instead of going out to hunt, they're like climbing your leg saying, feed me, dude, feed me. Come on, feed me. Like they're too urgent with that desire to eat. If they're too fat, then it's the other way around. You call them and they'll look back at you. It's like, dude, I'm having more fun playing in this puddle. Sorry, but I'm going to pass. And they'll just like ignore you.
Yeah.
So you want to have them at that ideal level where they're just hungry enough that they'll come when you call, but they're not so urgent that they're frantic. They're willing to go, 4 or 5 hours without eating and they'll be okay. It's not
Still
that big
focused.
a deal.
Yeah.
Still focused, still hunting,
Right.
So the thing that adds kind of a monkey wrench into that whole mix is each mink has a different food drive. Some mink can be pretty chubby and still very, I want to eat. I'm going to eat every chance I get. Another mink can be really quite skinny. And you're like, dude, you shouldn't be this skinny. And they're still like, I'm okay. So there's a personality factor to it as well as their body weight. A mink that's frantic to eat at one weight, a different mink might be pretty chill at the same weight. So you have to personalize it to the mink and know what you're working with. And that's how I get them back. I give them a little whistle and they know that whistle means food and they come back. Some of my mink, I get tame enough that I can handle them with my hands, but most of them I don't, because it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort to get them that tame and trustworthy. They're a vicious little animal. They like to bite. So I found it a lot easier just to teach them to go to like a little live trap or a little pet carrier. And then I don't have to handle them at all. I just open the door, give them a whistle. They go run in there, eat their little snack. I shut the door behind them, or if it's a live trap, it shuts itself. And then we go to the next area. And then when I go to put them back, I open the door. They go run in their cage because I have a little chunk of meat sitting in there waiting, and they know it. They're like, oh, if I go back in my cage, I'll get some food. So they run in their food in the cage, eat their food, shut the door. And so I just teach them to do everything I need without handling them the vast majority of the time. Right. However, I do get some satisfaction and joy out of having a mink that I can handle, and it frankly is more convenient. So about once a year, before it's old enough to really know who its mom is, right? So that it bonds to me and thinks I'm its mom, and I'll bottle raise it, put ridiculous amount of time into it. Just because you bottle raised it doesn't mean he'll stay nice. He'll get mean within a few weeks if you don't continue constantly handling and playing with and working with and building a bond with that animal. He'll be mean within a few weeks. So you keep building it up, and then when they get to a certain age, that bond is cemented. I see it seems to be like 3 or 4 months old. That bond is cemented, and then you can back off a little bit and maybe not play with him every single day, because he remembers, hey, we have that bond built from back when I was young. I'm good to go. But you can't really build that bond later in life. You can tame a mink later in life. That takes a lot of effort and patience, but they're never really going to be that trustworthy. You always have to kind of walk on eggshells. Oh, I don't want to make him mad. He'll bite me. I don't want to scare him. He'll bite me. I don't want to,
So are they just like biting you when you try to touch them, or are they just running up to your knee and just biting your ankle or something?
Oh, both. So it depends on the mink. Both. Some won't go out of their way to bite you, and they'll go through phases. I have a mink actually I was working with yesterday that I got down and was laying on the ground filming him, and he'd come out and I was like, oh, but he didn't bite me. And I was like, I remember back when you used to tag people for that.
Yeah.
but he, for whatever reason, grew out of it. When he was younger, if he got the chance, he'd nail you. Now you got to give him a reason.
He'll just nail you, huh?
Yeah. Oh yeah, you could be minding your own business and he'll come up and bite you. Most mink will. They just like to bite. They're vicious little suckers.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
And all my dogs know that. So all my dogs know that, and they know that they are not allowed to retaliate. Right. So you'll watch my videos. When a mink pops out, the dogs all step back. Some will even leave the area. It's like, dude, no, pay attention.
The mink will try to take a chunk out the dog.
Oh yeah, every chance they'll get. Most of them. Some of them won't. There's a few that are nice and they'll just ignore the dogs, but most of them will try and grab a dog.
They just think they're that badass or something.
Yeah, they think they're a lot tougher than they are. I mean, any one of my dogs that grab one in its mouth and shake it to death. Like, I don't have a dog. I don't own a dog that wouldn't just kill a mink, but they know they're not allowed to. So when that mink comes out of the hole, get out of the way, because he's going to bite me and I can't defend myself. So I better just avoid it,
Right. What is feeding looking like? What are you actually putting in there? I heard you say a chunk of meat, but what are they what are they eating and how much are they eating?
So I feed them whatever they're catching. So
Okay,
mostly rats and muskrats. I mean, sometimes
got
I'll
you.
add some other stuff like chicken maybe, or it's basically a filler, right? Because
Okay,
I might not have enough rats or muskrats, so I'll throw in some other kind of animal as a filler, like chicken, for example.
got you.
I don't typically use large animals for the mink feed, so I don't use beef or lamb or anything like that. It's usually small stuff. So whatever they would catch, rabbits, squirrels, rats, muskrats, and then some other small animal that I could buy from the store, like a chicken. If I need the filler, some years I don't need it. I've caught enough that I can feed them off of natural wild game. Some years I need a lot of filler because maybe we didn't catch as much, or I have a few more mink that year, so I need
Right.
more food. All of my dogs eat raw as well, but they eat bigger stuff usually. So they're eating like geese and beavers and beef, and just bigger animals usually. They eat a lot of beaver
Right.
meat, and they'll eat some chicken too. So there is some overlap. But occasionally I will end up feeding some smaller stuff to the dogs, but usually that ends up going to the mink. And the reason being is I grind the mink food, so it's not like chunks of muskrat or rabbit. It's ground up like hamburger with the bone and the guts and the fur and everything in it. So it's like a crunchy hamburger is kind of a gross way to think of it.
Okay.
But it's got the organ meat. It doesn't have stomach content, so it's not like poop and half digested plants and junk like that. No, I pull out the stomach and intestines, but the whole rest of the animal, feet, fur, feathers, internal organs, bones, all of that's mixed in, and they eat that. The dogs, I just cut it into chunks. So that's why they're eating bigger animals. Grinding a beaver is going to kill your grinder. Uh,
Right. Right. Right.
I've broken many grinders.
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I
Beaver.
stick to like chicken and under for mink, and then chicken and rabbits and up for dogs, with occasional exceptions to that.
Right. Right. What are some of the traits you're looking for when raising these animals? Like, what are some of the ones that you'll say, you know what, I'm not gonna breed this one. I'm gonna cull this one out of my program. And what are some of the traits you're looking for that'll say, yeah, that one right there, he's gonna be a part of the program in the future?
So I'm very picky on the mink I keep. Um, Kind of the way I look at it, if I can find one individual in a litter that's worth keeping for the next generation, that was a successful breeding.
Oh, out
Uh,
of a little.
yeah, if I can find one individual that I want to keep for breeding purposes, and I might find a couple that I would keep around for working purposes, but in my eyes, there's three levels. There's I don't want anything to do with you. There's I'll keep you around and use you for jobs and things, and then there's I'll breed you. And if I get one out of a litter that's breeding worthy, that's a successful litter. And there's occasions where like three or four will come out that way, but that's I don't, three or four is an exaggeration. Two or three, let's say. I don't know that I've ever had three or four come out of the same litter, but two or three might come out of the same litter, and I'm like, whoa, that was an awesome litter. Let's repeat that,
Right, right, right. So, okay, so you
And
repeat that one. Okay, I got you.
so what I'm looking for, number one, is what I call grit. In bulldog terms, you'd call it gameness, but it's not really gameness. It's different.
Okay,
Um, they don't. They have self-preservation. As tough as they sound, me saying, "Oh, they attack people and dogs," they have self-preservation. They're a wild animal. Sometimes it doesn't seem like they have self-preservation, but honestly, if those dogs started biting back, the mink would quit biting dogs. The problem
right,
is they're dead. So it's too late for them to learn. My dogs bite hard enough. I wouldn't have a live mink after one confrontation. So
right,
I
right,
can't allow them to learn through natural experiences. Hey, don't bite a dog, because that ends in a maimed or dead mink. So I basically am forced to say, hey, dog, sorry, buddy, but you just got to put up with it and stay out of the way, because there's no way to teach this mink without causing serious damage, because they're such a small animal. Um, so what I'm getting at is they act tough and they're the most like brazen creature alive. But when they get hit, if they grab a rat and it bites them back, the natural reaction is, whoa, I don't know if I like that, right? That's what every animal in the world thinks like, except for bulldogs and terriers and a few select individuals that have been bred by humans to ignore that. Most animals step back and say, ooh, I don't know if I like that. And then they have two choices. They either get scared or they learn how to keep doing it, but maybe not get tagged so often. And so that's what I'm looking for is the mink who, when they get bit, instead of getting scared, they just learn from it. Okay, I'm still determined enough I'm going to kill this rat and others in the future, but how do I get a hold of this rat without getting a hold of myself? And I also, as a mink, I'm speaking as if I'm the mink, I also have to realize that it's just going to happen from time to time. That's part of life. How do I avoid it without quitting completely? And that's really what I'm looking for. Not this brazen, go in, fight a raccoon, nothing crazy like that. They need to have some self-preservation, but they need to have enough go get them that they don't quit just from a few bad experiences with a rat or a muskrat. One of the cool things about mink is they are the absolute assassins. They are exceptionally good at going in and taking on another animal that could bite them and do it without getting hurt. So they can go through a slew of muskrats or rats, dispatching one right after another without any bites. The problem is when they do take a bite, how are they going to mentally handle it? And there's no way to know until you actually see what the mink does. And so I very carefully select for the ones that are mentally durable. They're gritty, as I call it. They don't quit. They don't just give up because they got bit a few times. And they don't give up both short-term and long-term. I've seen mink that'll get bit up by a muskrat, still kill that muskrat, but the next time out, they're nervous. So it's not even, hey, did you quit on that specific muskrat? I don't really care what he does. I mean, I hope that he goes through and kills it, right? But even if he quits on that muskrat, what I care more about is what he does next time. Because the next time he might go in and kill the next one. He's like, oh, man, I got beat last time, but I'm not going to let that happen again. Or he might be like, dude, I'm never touching those things ever again. I'm not even going in their holes anymore. And so that's the number one tricky thing to find, are the mink with enough drive, enough grit that they will continue hunting no matter how difficult the situation is, no matter how difficult the animal, the muskrat or rats that they're hunting are. The number two thing is then to have athletic ability on top of that. Have the quick, strong, athletic body that allows them to capture prey. And finding both in the same package can sometimes be a little bit tricky. The next thing that I'm looking for, I like that high food drive. So like I mentioned, in order for me to get them back, they have to be hungry enough to want to come for the food. And one way to control that hunger is through weight control, but the other is through just that particular mink's personality. Does he have a high food drive, mid food drive, low food drive? Right. I don't select for that as carefully as I do the grit and the athletic ability, but it definitely is a big plus if that mink can be, any reasonable weight, not obese, just any reasonable weight, and he's still coming back. That's a lot easier mink to handle than one that I have to have just the right weight. I have to weigh it down to the 10 grams to get them to the point where they're hungry enough to come back, but fat enough that they're still strong and healthy. That's just annoying. So food drive is a big plus. I wouldn't say it's a specific trait that I'm searching for all the time, but it's a big plus. Another big plus is what I call caching instinct, which is the ability to teach that mink to bring back what he caught, not just leave it down in a hole. That's a big plus. And really a crap shot when you have it. I mean, it's genetic. I shouldn't say it's a crap shot, but when you get it, you could breed it and it comes through pretty well. But then you got to look for those two more important traits, athletic ability and grit. And then another trait that I like, but I don't even barely look for at all, it's like an afterthought. And that's a natural, tame, non-human aggressive temperament. That's a plus, right? They're not trying to bite you all the time. But honestly, that's so low down on the totem pole, and I have so many other traits to look at that it's really an afterthought when I notice, hey, this mink isn't so mean. but he's hunting well. I kind of like that, but it's really not something I'm searching for at this point. If I can get those other traits more consistent, let's say the high grit and the athletic ability is like 2/3 of the litter, you know, instead of one individual in the whole litter, then maybe I could start having the luxury of focusing on these other traits like caching and like food drive, excuse me, and like not being human aggressive. But those things are so down on the list right now that I'm not particularly worried about it. It's just like a cool bonus when they pop up.
Right, right. So what are we talking about as far as litter size? And how long is from pregnancy and the conception and everything? What's that process looking like?
So most litters are around 6. 6, I don't know, 5 to 8, I would say is pretty normal. Anything under 5 is kind of a small litter. Anything over 8 is like, well, that's pretty big.
I think I saw you with like an 8 or a 9 one time.
Oh yeah, I've had several 8 or 9s. I've had a couple 10s. Okay. I think 10 is the biggest that's ever survived. I might have had 11, but one died, but I can't recall for sure. I've seen as big as like 12 where they all survive on mink farms, but that's really rare. 10 is kind of the healthy limit, because anything above that is just not very reasonable for the mother to raise under most circumstances.
Right.
So like 8, 9, 10, that's a good solid litter. You don't really want more than that. They breed once a year, and they breed the same time of year. They are photosensitive, so which means the amount of light they're exposed to controls their whole reproductive system. So unlike a male dog is always ready to breed at any moment, right? And a female dog is ready to breed roughly twice a year. Some females, it might be only once, but typically about twice a year with most females.
When she goes into heat.
Yeah. And they go into heat for, 10 days or whatever it is. And they can be bred during that week-ish period of time twice a year. Female mink are very different, and male mink, they come into heat together. So the males are sterile 90% of the year. And the females, same as female dogs, they only are fertile when that season comes. But for mink, they all do it together. So it's not like dogs where you're like, yeah, I had one bitch come into heat in January, another one in March, the other one in July. It's not like that. They all come in together, and it's because of the light exposure that they have. So when the daylight hours gets to the right point, all of the mink, males and females, basically come into heat together, and it's about almost a month period of time where they're able to breed, and then it's gone, and then they got to wait until next year. Now you can mess with that artificially by putting them under artificial lights, but the tricky part is you got to have all the mink in sync. If you put the lights on the female and not on the male, he's not going to be able to breed her, or vice versa. So they would have to be exposed to the same amount of daylight in order to come in heat at the same time and breed at the same time. And the more you mess with it, the more things are likely to go wrong. So it's easier just to let nature take its course, let them be exposed to natural daylight cycles, and then they'll come into heat right in around the 1st of March if you're in my latitude. Lower latitudes, so like down in Louisiana, they'll come into heat as early as, I believe it's January, so they're giving birth in like March. Where I live, they're coming into heat in March, so they're giving birth in like the 1st of May-ish. Alaska, they're not being born until June. So the reason for that is if you were to look at a daylight hours of each of those locations, they're different, right? Because of where you're at, how far north or south you live, you get a different amount of daylight at different times of year, if that makes any sense. So when a mink female comes in heat, they're what's called an induced ovulator, which means they don't ovulate on their own. If a female dog comes in heat and you don't breed her at the right time, her ovulation will pass and you missed it. Mink aren't like that. Their bodies are sitting there waiting to be bred by the male. And once they're bred by the male, then they ovulate. They definitely have a window when they can ovulate. So obviously you've got a month period of time when they could have ovulate, but they don't just do it automatically. Mink are very rough breeders. The males have to basically capture and conquer the female. Conquistarla, like if you know Spanish. It's a literal conquistar. It's not a figurative like they say in Spanish. He's got to conquer that female. And if he doesn't conquer her, she won't let him breed. She'll beat him up. Get out of here. You're a pansy. I need a real man to come take charge. And that male mink has to get a hold of her, beat her down, chew her up. I mean, it looks like they're trying to kill each other. You have to get some experience before you know, hey, they actually are trying to kill each other. I better break them up. And, oh, they're just breeding. Everything's fine. But to a novice, it all looks the same. It's all the same thing. They're all trying to kill each other until you actually know what you're looking at. And then once you know, you're like, oh, they're not really fighting. It's just breeding process. So he gets a hold of her. He wrestles her down, grabs her by the scruff of the neck. And eventually she submits. She's like, okay, you're tough enough. You can sire my offspring. And she lets him breed. Some people think of it as, oh, he raped her. It's not true. If she doesn't want to breed, she's not going to breed. She'll kick his butt. So it's kind of like a mock fight. She's resisting until he proves himself, and then she lets him breed. It's not really a force thing, because at any point she could decide, nope, it's not happening, and he can't force her. He just can't. Even though he's bigger, males are roughly half bigger, 50% bigger than the females, roughly. He can't force her. They have to submit, but they won't submit unless the male proves himself by wrestling her down. So anyway, so it's a rough process, but part of that rough process causes the female to ovulate. So they could actually, getting in a fight could rough handling. You catch one with gloves and like rough them up. They could actually ovulate just from you catching one with gloves. You have to rough them up enough. So I'm not saying it's like that easy, but they've done studies where just handling them roughly with gloves on or two mink fighting over food or whatever could potentially trigger her body into thinking, oh, it's time to ovulate. But generally it's that full breeding process. The roughing up and the active breeding causes her to ovulate. And mink breed for a very prolonged period of time. So between the fighting and the actual breeding, 15 minutes is considered short. So if you have two mink breed for 15 minutes, you are like questioning whether anything even happened. You're like, did he even get her? I'm not sure. So really it's over the 20-minute mark that you start considering it a breeding. And that 20 minutes is, once again, that's a short breeding, but it's long enough you can feel like, it probably got her bred.
Are they stuck? Are they stuck like the APBT or
no? They don't swell up. He just basically holds on to her and he stays inside of her, but it's not physically forced that way. The way dogs swell up and are tied. They don't have a tie. It's just that they continue to breed. And that's usually like I said, a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour plus. And then what's best to do is once they're done breeding, give her about a day, anywhere from 12 hours to 24 hours later, breed her again, because now she's just barely ovulating. That way you get a fresh batch of sperm in there, and you don't have to have this 12 odd hour old sperm trying to fertilize the eggs. You can have fresh sperm in there just as the eggs finally coming down to be fertilized. And you don't have to do that, but it just increases your chances if you breed her a second time, 12 to 24 hours later. The first breeding causing the ovulation, the second breeding is the hope is then fertilizes the egg with the fresher, stronger, healthier sperm. Once the female's bred, she'll go 8 days where she's unwilling to breed. And then roughly 8 days later, you could try her again. The male, hopefully she'll allow him to breed. They'll breed. And then you could do that again 8 days later. And then by then the season's over, whether she's bred or not, she's done. Her body's shutting down and getting ready to give birth if she's been impregnated. And if she's not, then her body's shutting down and not allowing any reproductive activities. So the interesting thing about mink, sorry, that was probably way more detailed than you were looking for.
Oh no, hey, we here for it. We here for it.
So the interesting thing about mink is they're what's called induced ovulators. So what that means is, or sorry, I already said that. We already know they're induced ovulators. What I meant to say, what's interesting about mink is they have delayed implantation, which means the egg, when it's fertilized, it comes down the fallopian tube, it goes down into the embryonic fluid, and most mammals at that point will then attach to the uterine wall and continue their development. Now, the egg, once fertilized, is already dividing as it comes down the tube and such. So in any animal, mink included. But in order to continue the division and the growth, they need to attach to the mother and receive nutrients from her to continue their development. Well, mink and other members of the weasel family don't immediately attach to the wall. They have they sit in suspended animation, not developing, not dividing further for a period of time. Now with mink, it's a pretty short period of time usually. It's like a few weeks, maybe a month, that they'll sit there not developing, and then they'll attach and continue to develop. And the thing that triggers that development is the amount of daylight they're exposed to. So you can trick them. You could breed them 1st of March, let's say, breed them again the 2nd of March, just to be sure, and then put them under artificial lights, and boom, that egg will attach within a few days instead of roughly a month. It'll attach within a few days, and you'll have the baby several weeks to a month earlier than you would have otherwise. But if you don't do that and you let nature take its course, like I said, 8 days later, she's ready to breed again. So you could potentially breed her again to another male, the same male, doesn't matter. She can get pregnant again. Those eggs come down the tube and they join the other eggs floating around the embryonic fluid. Roughly a week later, you could breed her again and have the same thing happen. And what's interesting, all those eggs, because they're suspended, they're not continuing their development, they are all the exact same age when they finally do attach to the uterine wall. So you could, let's say she was bred by a different male each time. You could have a litter sired by 3 different males that were conceived a week apart each. So the first breeding is basically 2 weeks older than the last breeding, but they're born the exact same age and developmental stage and everything. But they all have different sires or conceived at different times. The mink are actually the least unusual in their weasel family when it comes to that practice of delayed implantation. They're crazy members of the weasel family. Like one of the weasel species, I can never remember which one. Their delayed implantation is like 9 months. So the egg could get fertilized and it will sit and float in that embryonic fluid for 9 months.
Wow.
Before it attaches to the uterine wall and continues to develop. So how that becomes useful is the weasels can actually be impregnated as teeny tiny little helpless infants. So when their mother's cycle is like a few weeks after she gives birth. So she gives birth and roughly a month later or so, let's say 3 weeks later, right? Because I don't know the exact time. She's all of a sudden receptive to being bred. And this is weasels, to remind you, not mink. That male weasel will come in, breed the mother, and then go and breed all her little infant daughters that are like helpless and blind, laying in the nest. He'll get them all pregnant. But because of that delayed implantation, it doesn't negatively infect their bodies. Like if you were to think of like a 6-month-old puppy being bred, oh, that'd be horrible, right? Her body's not mature enough to handle it. She's still growing while carrying puppies. Like that's just not healthy at all. But in the case of these weasels, the embryos don't develop for 9 months. So sure, she gets pregnant, but nothing happens. She's just got these teeny little clusters of cells floating around in embryonic fluid. So it doesn't cause any stress on her body at all. She'll grow up, mature, become a full-size adult, and then several months later, give birth to babies she was impregnated with, clear back when she was a helpless little infant. So it's that delayed implantation is a very unique and rather strange feature of the weasel family. That they're basically, it only takes, I think it's 37 days for the embryo to develop, but because of the delayed implantation, they're pregnant for like 9 or 10 months before they actually give birth. So
wow.
kind of wild. And in the case of that one weasel species, they're pregnant for 11 months before they give birth. It's about a month of development and 10 months of just suspended animation where nothing's happening.
Yes, sir. No, that's amazing. What's a real important question? What are some of the benefits of having the minks side by side with the dogs on a hunt?
So the two creatures very much complement each other. The things that dogs can do, mink really struggle to do. Things that the mink can do, the dogs are completely unable to do. So, for example, a mink killing a rat, they're wrestling an animal. If it's a big rat and a small mink, let's say, that rat is pretty close to their body weight, right? So it's an almost ounce for ounce battle going on. And that's pretty difficult for the mink. Even if he doesn't get bit or injured, he's got to go through that muscle strain of wrestling it down, crunching it, killing it, move on to the next rat, wrestle it down, crunch it, kill it. He's taking the risk of being bitten every time he does that. I mean, there's only so many times a mink can do that in a row before he's just exhausted. Let's say 10, 12 rats if it's a phenomenal mink. And at the end of that, he's just beat. Well, a dog crunching 10 to 12 rats is not that big of a deal because they just grab it in their mouth, give a little shake, crunchity crunch, move on to the next, right? So a dog can blow through huge numbers of rats in a day. My best day ratting, we caught 512 rats with, I wish I remember how many dogs it was. It's like 5 or 6 dogs. Let me think. Bindi, Leia, Gypsy, Boss, and I think my friend's terrier was there. So 5 dogs and 512 rats. So basically, if you average that out, it was 100 rats per dog in about a 4 or 5 hour period, maybe 6 hours at the most. I don't remember the exact time, but I think it was like 4 or 5 hours. So in 4 or 5 hours, they were killing roughly 100 rats a piece. There's no way a mink is going to go through that number of rats. They're going to be exhausted at 10, right? So the sheer numbers that the dogs can kill versus the mink, it just makes logical sense. The mouth of the dog is the size of the full rat's body, and the rat is almost the size of the mink. The other thing is dogs, you then ask, well, why do you need the mink at all? Why not just use the dogs? Like, freak, if there's that much better than the mink, why do you need a mink at all? Well, the dog can't fit where a rat can. So rats will go squeeze down in their burrows. They'll go under buildings. They'll go in wood piles and rock piles and all kinds of places that a dog can't get to. And you can help the dog by, getting a forklift and lifting the shed that they're hiding under, or lifting the cement pad if it's just a pad that you can move. Things like that. You go in, you move the wood pile by hand. There's ways to expose the rats to the dogs, but there's always going to be those rats that the dogs and human combined, right, just can't access. They're in a place where you can't flood them out. You can't expose them by moving debris. They're just in there. And really the only option is the mink. The mink is about the size of the rat, a little bit bigger, so he can fit in a lot of the same places. There are definitely times where the rat can fit where the mink can't, but they're the exception rather than the rule. The other thing is there's times when you technically could access the rats. Let's say they're hiding under a shed and you've got a forklift or not a forklift, but like a tractor with a fork. You could just lift up that shed, expose the rats, and boom, let the dogs have at it. Well, that works great when there's like 3 or 4 rats. Even 3 or 4 is kind of questionable, to be honest. But that works great when there's 3 or 4 rats. You lift up the shed, you've got 3 or 4 dogs. Hopefully each one will catch a rat by itself, and you're good. But what happens when it's 20 rats or 30 rats or 50 rats? You lift up that shed, the dogs are going to catch 4 or 5 and 45 are going to escape. It's a very inefficient way of doing things because now the rats are scattered all over the farm or wherever the place is. And you've got to go find them in their new hiding places. And it's just It's a very inefficient way of doing things. So the next option is, rather than lifting it up, you can use a mink. You stick the mink down the hole. The mink will kill 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 rats or 12 rats or whatever he ends up catching. So that's like, say, if we're using the 50 rat example, let's say the mink catches, just to make a round number, 10 of those rats. Well, now there's only 40 to be caught by the dogs that could potentially escape. But those 40 aren't all running out at the same time. They're running out 1, 2, 3, 4 at a time. And so the dogs have a chance to catch the rat, regroup, catch the rat, regroup, catch the rat, regroup, instead of just a flood of rats boiling over, and they're just unable to handle the sheer numbers of rats, and most of them end up escaping. So there's times when using the mink and dog combined allows you to be way more efficient and catch every rat or almost every rat there, rather than just a few and the rest escape. And then there are times when there's just one rat left and you just can't access it. It's hiding in a place where you can't flood, you can't smoke, you can't lift up the object. It's just in there. And the only way to get it out is stick a mink down, let the mink kill it, or chase it out to the dogs. And so by having both animals combined, you're able to get the most efficient use out of your time. If you just have mink, you're going to kill a bunch of rats and the mink will get tired. If you just have dogs, you're going to kill a bunch of rats and then some are going to escape and not be accessible. But if you have the mink and the dogs together, it's really hard for the rats to escape both the mink and the dogs together.
Man, that makes it perfect sense. Perfect sense. We talked about a mink you had named Brute.
Yeah.
What's up with that guy?
Oh, he's a beast. So he's, I'd have to look at his ped. I think he's like 4th generation, my mink, 4th or 5th, something like that.
Okay.
And he is, geez.
Oh, you said he's 4 or 5 generations.
Yeah. So I owned his great grandfather, his grandfather, his mother, his father, back. Okay. I'd have to look to see how many generations. Maybe I'm way off. Maybe it's only 3, but he's for me, I know for dog guys, they're like, oh, 3 generations, that's nothing, dude. Like I'm a young
3
guy.
Generations I mean, that's good. 3 generations.
Yeah, that's a lot for me.
Yeah. Yeah, even in the dogs, 3 generations, you're putting in work.
Yeah, and I am very, very, very picky with who makes it to the next generation. So you can imagine the quality he has above and beyond just a regular mink you would get at a mink farm, right. or catch or whatever. So he came out. His brother is really mellow, nice and easy to handle, but fire on game. And that's what their grandfather or their great grandfather on both sides was like. He was a mink named Brock, who was just an absolute killer on game, on rats and muskrats and everything like that. But he was really nice and gentle and easy to handle. He's like the best of both worlds. This mink, however, got all fire. He got no gentle. And he is just, so he's figured out, when I'm out taking care of the mink, I wear these big rubber boots that go just below my knee. And the reason for that is because I'm always hunting in wet conditions. So it's just what I have available all the time for when I go out. So I end up using them for when I'm just cleaning up mink cages or feeding the mink, and I just end up wearing those. But it has an additional benefit that if the mink tries to bite you, you've got your ankles and your shins covered. So if they do come after you, you're probably not going to get hurt. They're just going to bite at your boot and it's no big deal. Well, this sucker, he figured that out, and he realized, man, every time I bite that boot, I could tell that's not flesh. I could tell I'm not getting this guy. So one of these days I went to his cage and he jumped up above my boot and grabbed me just below my butt cheek on my leg and just locked down. And I wear some real tough pants. Like normal jeans just don't last for me. I'm crawling through brush and crawling under people's porches and going over barbed wire fences, and I just destroy clothes. I am rough on stuff. So I'm wearing some pretty sturdy jeans just because that's all I wear and nothing else lasts. he got a hold of me and was hanging on my jeans, and I'm just shaking my butt back and forth, trying to get him off, and he's hanging on, and I'm a shaking, and I can't do anything because I have no gloves on it. I wasn't planning on handling a mink, so I had bare hands, so I can't reach down and like pull him off or anything. He's going to grab my hand. So I'm just shaking and shaking and shaking, and finally he comes off, and I just thought, oh, great, he'd lost his grip. And I hurry and get out of there and shut the door. And I go back in the house, and my wife, Maggie's like, what's that big hole in your pants? And I look, and he ripped a big old hole. I could stick like 2 or 3 fingers in the hole. It's a big old hole in my pants just hanging on. And another time, that brute mink, he got out. I opened the door and let him run around the yard for a second. And I have a dairy sheep that I raise on our lawn. She's basically my lawnmower that turns my grass into milk. So I just let her mow my backyard and my front yard and stuff, and get milk out of the deal. Well, she's out there in the backyard grazing, and he gets out and he runs right over and he latches onto her like a little bulldog, and she goes to swinging her head, and he's swinging all over the place, and like he's what is he, 4 pounds, but he thinks he can eat a sheep that's over 100 pounds, you know?
Yeah.
Crazy mink.
Yeah, these minks.
But he's still young though, so I don't really know how good he is. You know, he could have all that fire and all that bravado and seem like an absolute monster, and then he gets bit and decides he's going to pack it in. So really, he hasn't been proven yet. I've put him on a few stuff, but not enough that I feel confident in saying, oh yeah, he's really what he seems like. So time will tell whether brute is a true brute. But right now it's looking good.
You know, when I tell Dirt Road about this interview, he's going to ask me, did you ask him about Juno?
Juno, I was able to get Juno recently. She's still new to me. I'd have to go back and look, but I think I've had her about a month, give or take. She's a bulldog that was originally. So wait, you probably know her breeding better than I do. You said, tell us about her breeding, because I think you actually know more than I do, don't you?
Okay, she is the Grand Champion Karate stuff on the very top, and then you're gonna dig into some Mayday Buck blood right under that, coming through the Michael Myers and Mr. Superbuck, Miss Superbuck, and some of those dogs, Yellow Man. And then her bottom half is heavy on the Garner Caesar type blood and a bunch of Eli bred dogs. So she's got a lot of the Eli Carver on the bottom half, and the Karate, which is a mix in itself, but has been able to make its own lane. So you can just say Karate on the top unless you want to dig into it. It has Mayday blood in there. There's some Heinzel blood in there, and it's got a nice little cross. I wouldn't say a scatterbred dog, but nice cross dogs.
Yeah,
she's pretty good in my opinion.
She's a good looking dog too, real athletic looking, and she's smart from what I can tell. I haven't had her long enough to really say a whole lot about her, but she definitely seems smart, very quick and athletic. I've had her on a few ratings. She's definitely really easy to learn new things and to teach new things, willing to learn from me, which is typical, like I said, among the half a dozen working bred bulldogs that I've had. They all seem to be pretty willing to please and to learn. Even the dumb ones. I've had some that were really, really dumb. Like they cannot learn on their own. They just struggle to figure out the most basic of things. But from what I want to teach them, like obedience stuff, they pick it up really quick. They're like, oh, you don't want me to do that? Okay, I'll stop doing that. Oh, you do want me to do that? Okay, great, let's do it more. But figuring out like the clever stuff, some of the dogs are really good. Like I said, Juno's showing a lot of good signs with that. My Bindi bulldog, she's really clever, really smart on her own, just thinking. Um, but yeah, I like her, but I'm still getting to know her. Her style on raccoons it leaves a lot to be desired. She likes the extremities. She'll grab a leg, even far down as the foot, and it's just not helpful at all. When you're on a raccoon, you need to get in the vitals and get there quick. And she just hasn't figured that out yet. When she's working with my other bulldog, Bindi, they actually are kind of complementary. Bindi will get in the throat every time. As quick as she can get there, she's in the throat. And it's kind of funny. Juno will join and get in and grab the face and just dismantle it so it can't bite Bindi back. So Bindi's working on finishing it, and she's like, "Here, let me make sure it doesn't bite you in the process."
Yeah.
So they're kind of complementary, but obviously that's only an option when it's in the open. If they're down a hole, you can't do that. That only works when the coon's caught in the open, brushy areas, stuff like that. But yeah, I like her mind. I like how quick and athletic she is. I don't think she has a lot to offer when it comes to raccoon hunting unless she really changes her mind and starts hitting vital spots. I don't see her being a very useful dog in that regard. But when it comes to rats, she seems like, in my opinion, it's only a matter of time before she passes up my Bindi dog. Bindi's got the experience, so she obviously outshines her easily right now. But I think give Juno time, and if she doesn't match her, she'll probably pass her up. And I'll be pretty disappointed if I'm wrong. But animals, they're good at disappointing you sometimes.
Hey, she might start hitting those raccoons the right way. You never know.
You never know, man.
One thing about it, when they the raccoon, if she gets hit enough times, I mean, of course, she ain't gonna be good for that weekend, but after time, she's gonna be like, wait a minute, I got to do this shit differently.
That's what Dirt Road says. Dirt Road's like, yeah, just put the heat on her, she'll figure it out. Yeah. And I'm like, well, we'll see. She hasn't yet, but you never know. I mean, animals surprise you all the time. The ones you think are going to be the gems, the amazing, sometimes they're the first to quit. And the ones that you think, oh man, this dog's barely worth keeping, they end up becoming a gem. So you just never know, whether that's dogs or mink or horses or whatever. I've had horses where the first week you ride him, oh man, he doesn't buck at all. This horse is really calm and quiet. A month later, he starts bucking. And you're like, what in the heck? You're supposed to buck the first month, not the second month. And then they never quit bucking, I had the quietest, calmest, easiest going gelding that I ever broke. Somewhere like 2 or 3 months into riding him, just turned into an absolute bronc and wouldn't quit bucking for months on end. And he was so quiet for the first couple months. So yeah, animals are really good at making a fool of you. You could say, oh, this one's amazing, and they end up disappointing you, or oh, this one sucks, and they end up proving you're wrong. So like I said about that brute Mink, I'm excited to see what he becomes, but I'm always a little bit skeptical until he shows me what he really is.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I appreciate you for your time. You know what I'm saying? It was a real one. I'm going to definitely, just try to make it the best presentation. And I'll send it to you before I drop it.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
You can see it. But I'll be tapping in with you. I know you got things to do. The time is limited out here in these days.
Yeah, I've got some muskrats to catch, so
yeah. Nah, definitely, man. I'm excited, man. This was a great interview, man. Very informational. Oh yeah, one more thing. Because in our community, we got we already deal with the stigmas, as far as the APBT community. We welcome you with open arms. You own these animals, you care for them. But the stigma behind them and the negative things that that we have to deal with, we think that a lot of it is the mislabeling of the breed. What do you think about that?
So that's actually been one thing that I've really enjoyed about this adventure I've been on with bulldogs, is that I feel like, based on the comments in my videos, I've really been able to show people a different side of this breed. I've actually had anti-pit bull groups have whole what do you call them, threads? I can't remember the words because I never really got into the internet that much back when they had the internet groups where they all just chat.
All the blogs. All the blogs and stuff. Yeah.
Someone makes a comment, then the next person comments on it, and that such and so forth. So
Exactly.
I've had people find these and be like, "Hey, dude, they're talking about you," and send it to me. And these are hardcore anti-pit bull people, like as seriously anti as you can get. And they're like, their comments range from, "Dude, what is he thinking? He's going to get his mink killed and his kid's face removed, and oh, this is just a wreck," to, "Hey, man, if the mink guy thinks he can do it, maybe he can do it. You guys ought to give him the benefit of the doubt." And that was before I had success. That was when my bulldog, "Hey, come back, lay down, Juno. Come lay down." She's not totally potty trained yet. I don't trust her wandering around. She's going to go pee on the couch. So that every comment from, "Man, this guy's insane, I can't wait to see him fail," to, "You know what? You got to give him the benefit of the doubt. Look what he's done so far." And that was before I had success with them. That was back when Bindi was a little pup. And guys were even going so far as to sharing the ped. They're like, "Guys, he knows what he's getting into. Look at this. He's got, active dogs in the background of this dog's pedigree. Look at that champion and grand champion and da 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 da." He's and like I said, the two extremes were he's getting in way over his head, and the other was, "I don't know. I think he might be able to do it." So that was the initial reaction when I got Bindi, my first real bulldog that I ever really owned, to be frank.
Right.
And well, no, that's not true. That's not true. I had a couple before her. Sorry. But I didn't announce what they were. They just kind of appeared and disappeared in my channel because I tried a few dogs, a few different lines and stuff, kind of to get my feet wet to figure out what I wanted and didn't want. And so I got grown dogs, worked with them for, 4 to 6 months, and then sent them back to the owners, basically to narrow down what I wanted, because I knew I was ignorant. I didn't want to just pour everything into a puppy when I knew nothing what I was getting into or the guys I was getting dogs from, if that makes sense. Anyway, but the first one I raised from the scratch, Bindi, they were saying all these things. So now it's really cool to go back and look at those conversations and to see the comments on my videos of people saying, people have literally gotten on there and said, "Man, you changed my mind. I never thought I would think a pit bull was good for anything. I always saw them as absolute gangbanger dogs that need to be put down with no good use whatsoever. I am shocked and amazed." And if you go through my videos, it's not like a super common comment. It's not like every video has a dozen people saying that, but it's a shockingly common comment of, "Wow, my eyes are opened. I never really thought the breed could do that or be like that or be that trustworthy or be that useful," things like that, or be that smart. That's the number one thing. "Wow, I can't believe how smart she is. Look at her. She's putting the rat in the bucket by herself. Look at her. She's not attacking the mink. She's not fighting with the other dogs. Hey, that's a new dog. A strange dog is working with her and she's not fighting with it." Hey, they're just shocked that that is possible. And so I really feel like it's a wonderful opportunity to show people, hey, these dogs are more than just killers. They can be used for more than just dog fighting. They have other benefits, other uses that they not just can do, but they can excel at. Like I said, the best ratting dog I have right now, without any doubt, is my game bred pit bull Bindi. And if you look, I actually recently started putting up scoreboard so you could see what dog catches what rat. So it's like, oh, this dog catches 5 and this catch. That's a new thing that I've gotten into. And Bindi wins almost every time, and a lot of times by a significant margin. There's times when she catches as many rats as the 3 or 4 other dogs combined, and she almost always doubles the second place. So let's say the second place ratting dog caught 10 rats. She's almost always got like 20 or 21. So she doubles the second place dog, and sometimes even beats all the other dogs combined. And to see that, it's not just because she's like, "Oh, well, she's super intense." Well, no. That's part of it. But I think the biggest part is she thinks. She thinks about it, and she's quick, but that's not the biggest part. That helps. She's intense. That helps. But I think the biggest part is that she's smart. And that's just not something that people expect when they think of a pit bull. They think of powerful, they think of aggressive, they think of, a lot of things, but they don't ever think of smart. And so it's really fun to show people, hey, look, this dog has brains too. And not just kind of has brains, it has a lot of brains. And you can harness that power and that drive and that desire for something other than illegal activities.
Man, that's great. That's great. So you're on the same mission I'm on. I'm trying to paint these dogs in a positive light, do more things, encourage people to do events like wall climbing and different things. That's why we sit here and talk about these pedigrees all the time and digging, you know what I'm saying, to kind of show the world that these dogs are in fact, very important and, to the species in general. Like who talks about the lineage more than an American Pit Bull Terrier? Like, I would love to sit in on a Rottweiler panel for hours and months and days, and talk about lineage and history and performance and different things. And it's hard. Maybe it's on here somewhere though.
Well, I don't know anything about Rottweilers specifically, but I know a little bit about other breeds, and I haven't met another breed where people know much past the parents.
You see what I'm saying?
They might have a line. Oh, this is a Nuttall Patterdale. Okay, well, who's the grandparents? I don't know.
Right. Exactly.
So that's
and
the
you have the pedigree right there,
line.
But they won't even study the pedigree. You have the pedigree.
And the guys who are big into it, you'll find out they used to be bulldog guys.
Right.
They tried to turn to something more legal.
The bulldog guys excel. The bulldog guys excel in a lot of these other venues. A lot of different breeds. They excel in those breeds when they switch from bulldogs to whatever. Like there's a lot of bully guys that were bulldog guys.
Really, I kind of assume most bully guys were just like they had nothing to do with any dogs, and they just thought they were cool and got into it. I didn't realize they were ex-bulldog guys.
A lot of people. That's like the second best thing to them. And I wouldn't go extreme to the like crazy exotics and stuff, but
Yeah, I stay away from the bully stuff, so I don't really know that world. For me, I like working dogs, whether it's a terrier going down a hole after a woodchuck, or a greyhound running down a rabbit, or even just running on a track chasing a fake rabbit, or a Labrador retrieving a duck. I love working, useful, purpose-bred animals. So things like pugs and bullies just don't really interest me. I'm no offense to those people. It's just not an interest of mine. I like a working collie that goes out and brings in the sheep or the cows. I like a Malinois that captures a criminal, or just a sport, jumps over the different things and pretends to attack the guy in the suit. That's all cool to me. But my dog looks cool. It's just not an appeal to me at all.
Oh no, he looks cool, and you got to help him to the car.
Yeah, it just doesn't interest me at all. The dog could have any job, really. Sniffing out bed bugs, the most random, boring job you could think of. I still think is cool. Man, he sniffs out bed bugs, or he finds cadavers, or he finds lost people. That's super intriguing. A dog that's like, his job is to take a dump in my backyard. That's just not interesting to me.
And nothing else. No, I hear you. Yeah, I'm gonna tap in with you, man. The Mink Man. Salute to the Mink Man.
Thank you.
Tap in.
Beats by the bird.